Hello, hope you are okay. We're going to look at a historical problem in the Gospel of Luke, which people bring up, atheists and Muslims. So it's in Luke chapter 2, verse 2. In Luke chapter 2, let's see. Yeah, Luke chapter 2, verse 2, it says, "And it came to pass in those days that there went out a decree from Caesar Augustus that all the world should be taxed. And this taxing was first made when Cyrenius was governor of Syria, and all went to be taxed, everyone to his own city. And Josephus also went up from Galilee out of the city of Nazareth into Judea unto the city of David, which is called Bethlehem, because he was of the house of lineage of David." So that's the text there. And some people say, well, this couldn't have happened because Cyrenius was like not in the time of Herod, so it was like quite a few years after Herod he was the governor of Syria. Okay, so that's the problem. The problem is it's putting Cyrenius a time frame that it doesn't seem to be, and he seems to become later, round about 6 AD, not round about 4 BC or 2 BC in the time of Herod. So that's the historical problem that we're dealing with here. Okay, so these are some possible solutions. In Luke 22 may mean the census was before Quirinius was governor. This is currently one of the most academically respectable pro-Lucan arguments. Luke 22 says this was the first census when Quirinius was governor of Syria. But the Greek can be translated, this census happened before Quirinius was governor. If that's the case, it solves the problem. The argument is defended by linguistic studies by John Foley, article Greece and Rome, and argues that the traditional translation may obscure Luke's intended chronology. Why this matters? If Luke means before Quirinius, then Luke is distinguishing Jesus' birth from the famous AD 6 census, not dating it to that census. That removes the contradiction with Herod's reign. But a lot of Greek scholars say that this is not a possible argument. The second possible argument to defend Luke chapter 2, verse 2, is Quirinius may have exercised authority in Syria before his formal governorship. This is a view that I take. The reason is Quirinius was a troubleshooter for Augustus. Whenever Augustus needed money and it was a trouble area, he would send Quirinius there. So it makes sense that he would be he would be going backwards and forwards in these areas. Another major defense is that Quirinius may have held an earlier military administrative role in Syria before AD 6. We know Quirinius officially governed Syria in AD 6, but the inscription suggests he held early authority in these, possibly related to military campaigns. Some scholars argue Luke's phrase, while Quirinius was governing Syria, does not require Quirinius to be the formal governor, only that he had governing authority. Recent conservative scholarship continues to argue that Luke uses hegemon neontos broadly, not as a technical title. Why this matters? This allows Herod was alive before 4 BC, Quirinius active in Syria, a census under Augustus. Weakness, there is no direct evidence of Quirinius supervising a Judean census before AD 6. The third possible argument, but I favour that one because of the way Cyrenius was a troubleshooter for Augustus. Number three, there may have been an earlier census under Augustus that Luke knew about. Luke says a decree went out from Augustus that all the world should be registered. Augustus did conduct empire-wide registration programs, though not a single empire-wide consensus on one date. Scholars defending Luke argue that client kingdoms like Herod's Judea could have undergone local registration under Augustus before AD 6, separate from the well-known census in Josephus. Evidence: Augustus mentions multiple censuses in the Res Gestae. Provincial censuses were often staggered regionally. Why this matters: Luke may refer to an earlier local enrollment, while Joseph mentions the later AD 6 tax census. Weakness: there is no surviving record of such a Judean census before Herod's death. The next possible argument: Josephus may have compressed or misdated events. A new minority proposal argues Josephus may have misplaced the census chronology, not Luke. John Rhodes argued that Josephus may have duplicated census-related events, merged earlier disturbances into AD 6 census narrative. This theory has gotten attention in recent evangelical scholarship and discussions. Why this matters: if Josephus telescoped events, Luke may preserve an earlier tradition. This is highly speculative and most historians reject it, but it is a possibility. It's a possibility that Josephus conflated two events and put it in one, and it makes Luke as if he didn't know the time frame. But it could be that Luke was correct, that if you realize that when Josephus is on about the AD 6 census, that might have been earlier. So, excuse me. So those are some reasons for that, and also there's other issues as well, which we're going to just listen to a Catholic theologian. I don't agree with Roman Catholic theology, but I think it'd be interesting to just hear this about other issues concerning so-called contradictions in Luke and Matthew concerning the birth narrative. I don't agree with Catholic theology in terms of salvation, but I just read this article today and I thought it was an interesting article, and it's read out now. Great. So that's a Catholic guy. Like I said, I don't agree with Catholic theology or Catholic stuff, but I just read an article. That article. Oh, you can't hear it. Oh, right. Okay. Anyhow, we'll do this one then. Sorry about that. I thought you could hear it. So this is alleged contradictions in the Gospels. Timothy McGrew, Awkward Bible Church, December. Proverbs 18:17. The one who states his case first seems right until the other comes and examines him. Han and Nine, good to see you guys. Yeah, sorry, there's no schedule. I'm just doing it off the cuff these days. So forgive me, Han. Just every now and again. If I do a live, it's generally around about 8 o'clock. So you can always just look up on Zoom. 8 o'clock, is there something going on? I'll try and let people know a couple of days beforehand. So sorry about that, Han. Nine, God bless you. Also, I am doing these talks for the Bible College in Malawi, so those will be up on every Saturday, unless it's summer break, when we have summer break. But yeah, so I've got one more stream after this. After this, I'm going to do a little stream on this book. So after this stream, I'll be coming on again. So sorry, Han. I'm sorry, bro. Proverbs 18:17. The one who states his case first seems right until the other comes and examines him. So Bart Ehrman's Jesus Interrupted. So you go to the library, you get Bart Ehrman, you read it, you get confused. You listen to the Muslims, you get confused. Bart Ehrman, former Baptist minister, now professor of religious studies, apostate who was achieved popular fame by writing and lecturing against traditional Christianity. He says about the Gospels, the sources are hopelessly contradictory, as we can see by doing detailed comparison of the accounts of the Gospels. Bart Ehrman, The Historical Jesus, 2000, page 90. It's interesting, though. Bart Ehrman actually agrees with like 95% of the Gospels. Strangely, Contradictions, what are they? A contradiction is a pair of claim that cannot both be true. If one is true, the other one must be false. If the Gospels contradict one another, then they cannot all be completely truthful. Bart's claim there are so many contradictions throughout the Gospels, and they're so important that we cannot rely on the Gospels as trustworthy records of what Jesus actually said and did. Actually, really, what he's doing there is not arguing historically, he's arguing against inerrancy. Because historians, they will look at a document and look at it, is it generally reliable or not? That's what they say. And they don't just say, oh, it's not reliable, so we can't trust it at all. So like with Josephus, he gets some things wrong. But scholars don't go, oh, we can't trust Josephus at all. If you're going to do that, really, you're arguing against inerrancy. You're not arguing against history. Just saying. How does he do it? How does Bart Ehrman try to, and this is the Muslim methodology as well, Bart's strategy to treat difference as disagreement. Finds two stories in the gospel that are told differently, using different words, giving different details, naming different people, or emphasizing different things. Claim that these differences are contradictions. Example, the angels at the tomb. On the third day after Jesus' death, the women go to the tomb to anoint his body for burial. And whom do they see there? Do they see a man, as Mark says, or two men, as Luke says, or an angel, Matthew? The normal explanation, the woman saw two angels. That can explain everything else. Why Matthew says he saw an angel. He mentions only one of the two angels, but doesn't deny there was a second. While Mark says it was a man, the angels appeared to be men, even though they were angels, and Mark mentions only one of them without denying there was a second. And why Luke says it was two men, since the angels appeared to be men. But objection to this answer. The problem is that this kind of reconciling again requires one to assert that what really happened is unlike what any of the Gospels say, since none of the three accounts states that the woman saw two angels. Jesus interrupted, page 8. Responding to Bart, if he means that none of the Gospel accounts is by itself identical with this reconstruction, then it does not matter. If it means the Gospels are in conflict with this harmonization, then it's not true. Blocking Bart's strategy, do sensible harmonization, read the text realistically, understanding that there are almost always variations in the way any two honest writers describe the same event. An example for the United States history. Who read the Declaration of Independence from the balcony of the old State House in Boston on the morning of July 18, 1776? Some early sources say it was William Greenleaf, High Sheriff of Suffolk County. Other early sources say it was Colonel Thomas Craft. Someone must be wrong here, right? Resolved by further information. Actually, both are true. Greenleaf had a weak voice and the crowd could not hear him clearly, so Craft repeated it after him, sentence by sentence, loudly enough for all to hear. The apparent contradiction was caused by the assumption, plausible sounding but unwarranted, that it could not be both, but it was. Bart's strategy assumed that the Gospels never Bart's strategy assumed what the Gospels never claim. Assume that the Gospel authors are each trying to give every detail about every event. Treat this assumption as though the authors had explicitly claimed it. You can now treat any differences in the account as contradictions. Be sure to leave out any inconvenient bits of the text that might ruin the impression. Example, the woman at the tomb. Who actually went to the tomb? Was it Mary alone? John 21. Mary and another Mary, Matthew 28:1. Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of Jesus, and Salome, Mark 16:1. Or woman who had accompanied Jesus from Galilee to Jerusalem, possibly Mary Magdalene, Jonah, Mary the mother of Jesus, and other woman, Luke 24:1. Jesus interrupted, page 48. Breaking down this question, was it Mary alone in John 21? John 21. Now on the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene came to the tomb early while it was still dark and saw that the stone had been taken away from the tomb. In John 22, Mary says to Peter and the disciples whom Jesus loved, they have taken the Lord out of the tomb and we do not know where they have laid him. How can it have been Mary alone if she speaks in the plural here? Example 2, breaking down the question. Mary and another Mary, Matthew 28:1. Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James and Salome, Mark 16:1. Neither Matthew nor Mark claim to have a complete list. Mary Magdalene, Jonah, Mary the mother of James, and other woman, Luke 24:1. Luke explicitly tells us that his list is incomplete. Blocking Bart's strategy differences is not disagreement. Two accounts do not need to be identical in order for both of them to be true. We apply this sort of methodology constantly in the study of secular history and courts of law. A legal view of testimony. It so rarely happens that a witness of the same transaction perfectly entirely agree in all points connected with it, that an entire and complete coincidence in every particular, so far from strengthening their credit, not unfrequently engenders a suspicion of practice and concert. Thomas Starkey, Practical Treatise of the Law of Evidence, 10th America, 4th London edition, 1870, page 830-31. So if the Gospels had agreed perfectly without any slight variation, you would have thought these are not honest people. They've kind of doctored this. But that there are these slight differences gives it kind of the reality that they've not sat down to try and con us. Bart's strategy: exploit your reader's ignorance. If there is a place where there is a scholarly dispute about the text, choose the position most unfavorable to traditional Christianity and present it as though it is what all scholars know. Make sure not to mention the fact that other scholars disagree. Bart on the end of Mark. One point in particular seems to be irreconcilable. In Mark's account, the women are instructed to tell the disciples to go meet Jesus in Galilee, but out of fear, they don't say a word to anyone about it. Jesus interrupted, page 49. Mark 16:8, and they went out and fled from the tomb, for trembling and astonishment had seized them, and they said nothing to anyone, for they were afraid. What is the problem? In each of the other three Gospels, the woman tells the disciples what happened. Bart wants to create a contradiction by reading Mark as saying that they never said a word to anyone. Is that the right reading of Mark? About the ending of Mark, nearly all scholars agree that the long ending of Mark in 16:9-20 was not part of the original text. I disagree with that. I mean, it is true that scholars say that, but I think that the last ending of Mark is original. Because I go with the Textus Receptus, which is a better strand of manuscripts. There is a disagreement among scholars regarding the question of whether Mark 16:8 was the original intended ending of the Gospel, or whether it represents a place where the narrative was broken off, either never completed with the original conclusion now being lost. I don't agree with this stuff. Let's look at the last ending of Mark. I don't agree with it. I think the last ending of Mark is scripture, personally, based on a better strand of manuscripts. So let's see. Mark 16:8, and they went out quickly and fled. Right. Now, when Jesus was risen early this day of the week, he appeared first to Mary Magdalene, out of whom he cast out some devils. And she went and told them that had been with them, and they mourned and wept. Yeah, so, last end of Mark, there's other appearances, so it's not a good argument by Bart Ehrman. Mark's typical usage, Mark 5:37, and he allowed no one to follow him except Peter and James and John, the brother of James. Mark 9:8, and suddenly looking around, they no longer saw anyone with them but Jesus only. Mark 9:9, he charged them to tell no one what they had seen until the Son of Man had risen from the dead. Mark's typical usage, why do you call me good? No one is good except God alone. Mark 13:32, but concerning the day of the hour, no one knows, not even the angels in heaven, nor the Son, but only the Father. What this suggests about Mark, it is entirely plausible that the original ending of Mark's Gospel ran something like this. I think this is a bit conjectural. That was a bit conjectural about the last ending of Mark. I don't agree with it. I think it's been preserved. Yeah, this scholarly Bart chap always trying to say majority of Bible is accurate, but not really 100%. The Red Sea crossing destruction, yeah. Yeah, well, he does contradict himself, because if the Gospels are inaccurate, why do you keep quoting them? Why do you keep using it to build an argument? Obviously you think the text is worth using to attack it, so it's telling you that you actually think it's more reliable than you're actually letting on, which is true. He was asked in a debate with Aitken, a Catholic writer, a Catholic apologist, Aitken. It was a very good debate, actually. And Aitken put on a map and put on a list and showed like how much Bart Ehrman actually agreed with the Gospels. It was like 95% of what the Gospels were saying on the major issues Bart agreed with. It was only like 5% he disagreed with. So he actually believes more than he's actually letting on. Blocking Bart's strategy, do your homework, knowing that our best manuscripts of Mark break off at Mark 16:8. I don't agree with this at all. Sorry, bro. Bart's strategy quote. I believe that the last ending of Mark. Let me just last ending of Mark. Let's just go back. Just on the last ending of March, just defending that here. You can get the article here. This is the case for the last ending of Mark. It's in private chat, the link as well. The case against the last ending of Mark by Ahmed. I am grateful to respond to James Snap article. He argued that we should regard Mark 16:9-28 as the ending of Mark's gospel. I will argue instead that we should regard Mark 16:8. Oh, sorry, I've got the wrong article there. Sorry about that, folks. Let me get. Okay. Okay, we got it here. Sorry about that. I thought it was defending them. Tom's Theology blog, a defense of the longer ending of Mark. But there are good books out there. Christian Apology Theologian author, former documentary filmmaker, graduated at Cardwell University, Emmanuel Theological Seminary. See you fall by.
Welcome to Tom's Theology blog.
He's done postgraduate at Dallas Theological Seminary. So, okay. Anyhow, let's just look at some of the arguments. Defending the longer ending of Mark. And he said to them, go into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature, Mark 16:15. The longer ending of Mark's gospel, consisting of verse 9:20, has faced criticism from scholars who claim it was later addition to the text. However, the evidence from manuscript, early church history, and theological consistency and divine providence strongly supports this authenticity. This ending is found in the KJV, New King James, etc. Textual evidence, widespread manuscript support. While the omission of Mark 16:9-20 in two early manuscripts, Codex Sinaiticus and Codex Vaticanus, 4th century, is often cited as evidence against its authenticity, the majority of textual witness support it. Over 99% of existing Greek manuscripts. Did you hear that? 99% of existing Greek manuscripts, including Mark 16:9-20. These include Codex Alexandrians, Codex Ephraim, a wealth of Byzantine manuscripts. The longer ending is preserved in ancient translations such as the Old Latin, Syriac, Coptic, Gothic, demonstrating its early widespread acceptance across the geographic area. Church fathers provided additional early testimony. Irenaeus 130-202 explicitly quotes Mark 16:19. Annotation Diadacerant 160 to 175 also included. The omission of Mark 16:9-20 in minority manuscripts can be explained by historical and textual circumstances. Damaged scrolls, ancient scrolls often lose their final section due to wear and tear. Liturgical preference. Some early lectionaries favor short gospel readings. Theological misunderstanding. Verses like Mark chapter 16, verse 17-18, which describe miraculous signs, may have caused some scribes to hesitate in preserving the passage for fear of misrepresentation. Theological coherence. Critics claim the longer ending introduces foreign concepts to Mark's gospel, yet it aligns perfectly with Mark's theme and broader New Testament. Resurrection appearances. Mark 16, verse 9-14. The appearance of Jesus to Mary Magdalene, the disciples, and others affirm the central message of the Gospels, Christ's triumph over death. And yeah, so there's other arguments there. So there we are. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of. Let me just delete that comment there. Delete that comment. I can't believe I put that there. Forgive me, folks. So there's an article, but there's good books that have come out defending the last ending of Mark. So I didn't agree with McGrew on that bit, so I just thought I'd put that right. Bart's strategy. Quote verses out of context. Find a set of passages that can be made to look like they contradict one another by leaving out key words. State the supposed contradiction carefully so that a casual reader will not realize that you have taken portions of verses out of context. Example, finds a contradiction. Bart finds a contradiction in John. In John's Gospel, Jesus performs his first miracle in chapter 2 when he turns the water into wine, a favorite miracle story on college campuses. We're told that this was the first sign that Jesus did in John 2:11. Later in that chapter, we're told that Jesus did many signs in Jerusalem in John 2:23. Example, Bart finds a contradiction in John, and then in chapter 4, he heals the son of a centurion. The author says this was the second sign that Jesus did. One sign, many signs, and then the second sign, Jesus interrupted, page 89. John interpreted this first of his signs Jesus did at Cana of Galilee, John 2:11. John 4:50. This was now the second sign that Jesus did when he had come from Judea to Galilee. One sign in Galilee, many signs in Jerusalem, which is not in Galilee, and then a second sign in Galilee. What is supposed to be so mysterious about this? Blocking Bart's strategy. Read the text for yourself. No further comment seems necessary. Bart's strategy: deliberately misinterpret the text. Find a passage where the text can be misread in a way that makes it seem awkward or absurd. Present this reading as though it's the only possible reading. Be careful not to draw your reader's attention to the more obvious and natural interpretation. Example, the triumphal entry. In Matthew, Jesus' disciples procure two animals for him, a donkey and a colt, and they spread their garments over the two of them. And Jesus rode into town straddling both. Matthew 21:7. It's an odd image, but Matthew made Jesus fulfill the prophecy of Scripture quite literally. Jesus interrupted, page 50. Let's read the text for ourselves. Matthew 21:7. They brought the donkey and the colt and put them their cloaks, and he sat on them. Common sense check. Is the antecedent of them the donkey and the colt, or the cloaks? A.T. Robertson. The garments, of course, the words in the Greek might refer to the two animals, but such reference is by no means necessary. Matthew is not careful to distinguish, but common sense can do it. Commentary of the Gospel, according to Matthew, A.T. Robertson. Blocking Bart's strategy, use common sense. Enough said. How not to read the Gospels. It is a capital mistake to theorize before one has data. Insensibly, one begins to twist facts to suit the theories instead of the theories to suit the facts. Example, the day of the crucifixion. In Mark's Gospel, Jesus lived through that day before the Passover, and his disciples prepared the Passover meal and ate it with them before being arrested, taken to jail for the night, tried the next morning, and executed at 9:00 a.m. on the Passover day. But in John, Jesus dies a day earlier on the day of preparation of the Passover. Jesus interrupted, page 26. Reading the text for yourselves. In Mark chapter 4, verse 12, and on the first day of unleavened bread, when they sacrificed the Passover lamb, his disciples said to him, "Where will you have us go? Prepare for you to eat the Passover." John 19:14, describing the scene where Jesus is condemned to be crucified. Now it was the day of preparation of the Passover. The apparent contradiction in Mark, the Last Supper takes place on the first day of the Passover. Jesus is arrested that night and crucified on the next day, the first day, as the Jews reckon, days of Passover. According to Ehrman, John tells us that the crucifixion took place on the day of preparation for the Passover. The day is before the Passover. What John really says, John does not say that it was the day of preparation for the Passover. He said it was the day of preparation of Passover. Mark uses the same term, but he also tells us what it means. Mark 15:42. And when evening had come, since it was the day of preparation, that is the day before the Sabbath. In other words, preparation means preparation for the Sabbath, not preparation for the Passover. Reading John more closely in John 19:31, since it was the day of preparation, and so that the bodies would not remain on the cross on the Sabbath, for the Sabbath was a high day, the Jews asked Pilate that their legs might be broken and that they might be taken away. John agrees with Mark that it was the day before the Sabbath. This is what he means by preparation. 3 more questions. What does John mean when he says, for that Sabbath was a high day? He means that it was a particular special feast day, not just any Sabbath day, but a Sabbath in the Passover week. Three more questions. What about John 18:28? Then they led Jesus from the house of Caiaphas to the governor's headquarters. It was early morning, and they themselves did not enter the governor's headquarters, so that they would not be defiled, but could eat the Passover. Doesn't this contradict the claim that the Passover had already been taking place? Some facts about the Passover. The Passover is just not one day, it's a week-long festival. Throughout the Gospel of John, the word Passover occurs 8 other times and always refers to the festival as a whole, not to the opening meal. The Seder or supper that begins the Passover celebration is not the only ritual meal eaten during the Passover. In fact, there is another ritual meal, the Chagiga, eaten at midday the following day. Some facts about the Passover. If the chief priest had entered the Pilate's dwelling, had been defiled by so doing, the defilement would expire at sundown. All they would need to do is wash, and they would be ceremonially clean for the evening meal. Therefore, they must be concerned about some meal other than the evening meal, so their worry here cannot have to do with the initial Seder in Passover. Some facts about the Passover. The concern of the chief priest is not and could not be about the Passover Seder, for then their worry would make no sense. The Seder was already over, having been eaten the previous evening. They are concerned about some other meal in the Passover, probably the Chagiga. More questions. But isn't the meal in John 13 a different meal from the Last Supper in the Synoptic Gospels? Jesus interrupted, page 26. They do eat a final supper together, but in John, Jesus says nothing about the bread being his body or the cup representing his blood. Instead, he washes the disciples' feet, a story found in none of the other Gospels. 2 undesigned coincidences. In Luke 22:27, for who is the greater, one who reclines at table or one who serves? Is it not the one who reclines at table? But I among you as the one who serves. what did Jesus mean by that last phrase? To what could he be in referring? Two undesigned coincidences. In John 13:4-5, Jesus rose from supper. He laid aside his outer garments and taking a towel, tied it around his waist. Then he poured water into a basin and began to wash the disciples' feet. Only John records the events that make sense of Jesus' statement in Luke. Two undesigned coincidences, but why does Jesus wash their feet? Luke 22:24. A dispute also arose among them as to which of them was to be regarded as the greatest. Only Luke mentions the dispute that explains why Jesus gave them this object lesson in servanthood. So what's the point of this video? It's just, the point is, when atheists and Muslims bring up there are contradictions in the Gospels, they have certain tactics, certain methods, and not to just fully answer these things, but just to show you that they can be answered, that there are answers, and just to, it's only a little start for you to think about how you might answer questions if they say, oh, the birth narratives, there's contradiction there, or there's contradictions in in the ending of, in the death of Christ, the trial of Christ. I think one of the main things that we can take away is whenever they say there's a contradiction, I think the biggest lesson of all this 50 minutes that we've done, the biggest lesson that you can learn is someone tells you that there is a contradiction in the Gospels. Ask them to bring the text, show you the text, and show you the evidence. And get them to read the text. Because in a discussion, they will make a statement, and then you go on that statement, and you're on the back foot. But I think what's important is just say, right, you say there's a contradiction in the Gospels. Read the text for me and show me in the other text where there's a contradiction. And then you yourself look at it really closely, and you'll find there's probably a high probability they misunderstood or misinterpreted the text. And I think that's the biggest lesson that we can learn from looking at Bart Ehrman and looking at this topic. So I'm going to go now. I'm doing another live. I'm going to do a few minutes on this book, which I'm reading. So you want to come on the next link? Yeah. The Dawa people use the same tricks as Bart Ehrman. So yeah, I'm trying to do. So that's it, really. I'm going to come back now and just finish off a live show on this book and talk about this book, what I've been learning from the book, and I'm only quarter way through, but I'm enjoying this book. So if you come back, I'm going to leave the stream. So Han, Nine, and anybody else, I'm leaving the stream. Come back to the next stream. We're going to look at this book briefly, just for 5 minutes, because I'm getting a bit tired. And I did a lecture today, a short lecture, so I need to get that sent to the people in Malawi and things. So, yeah. All right. I'll see you in a minute.